So welcome everybody to this session on insights into participation and digital technologies in an urban context. So this is the third session of this GATES project conference. For those of you that have not been present in the previous session, I just want to tell you that this project is a collaboration between the Chair of Societal Transitions and Agriculture at the University of Hohenheim and the Acopian Center for Environment from the AUA. And the aim of this project and the conference is to exchange knowledge and experiences between both institutions and beyond in the use of participatory approaches for land and natural resource management. The initial focus of the project was on ecosystem services and public participation GIS, but as years passed in the project, we realized that there was a need to broaden a bit the scope and to also cover other frameworks to conceptualize these human-nature relationships as well as other forms of participation. The focus of this session is on how participatory approaches aided by new technologies can contribute to engage multiple stakeholders and inform policymaking in the planning and management of urban and peri-urban areas. I will be moderating this session. I am Maria Garcia-Martin, postdoctoral researcher at the Swiss Federal Institute for Forests, Snow and Landscapes, and have worked a lot with Claudia in the previous year. And with my research, I have mostly worked with participatory approaches and particularly with public participation GIS. And this is why I've been part of this project, mostly involved in contributing to training courses and creating the e-modules and other materials. Claudia Bieling and Alan Amirkanian are here, who are the heads of these centers and the coordinators of the project. I don't know if you want to add something or if we just continue. Okay, perfect. For those of you that were not with us in the previous sessions, just to tell you that there is the possibility of following these discussions also in Armenian. So you can change the language or select the translation mode in one of the buttons that are down in your Zoom tools panel. If you have any questions, you can also contact us through the chat and we can help you with that. I'm going to proceed to introduce our keynote speaker, Nora Fagerhum. Nora is a human geographer and a landscape researcher. Her research interests linked to a holistic understanding about human-environment interactions in a spatial context, and she has contributed to this field of research by increasing the understanding about the role of sociocultural values and perceptions for transdisciplinary planning and management of sustainable societies. She holds a PhD in geography and the title of docent in participatory landscape research at the University of Turku in Finland, and has spent a lot of time of her postdoctoral research at the University of Copenhagen. Currently, she is running an academy research fellow project with the title Wellbeing Benefits of Urban Green Infrastructure Mapped through Participation and 3D Virtual Landscapes. And she's also currently involved in an Horizon 2020 project that is called Charter, where her team brings experience to assess herders' livelihoods in the Arctic. I'm very happy to have Nora with us today as the keynote of this session. And before I give her the word, I will just like to invite everybody that is with us to write your questions to Nora in the chat or to note it down so we can address them at the end of her presentation. So Nora, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here, and from my dear colleagues Maria and Claudia, I have heard some stories about Armenia and your project, and yeah, it all sounds very interesting. I'm also a bit sorry that I couldn't join the earlier days, yesterday or today, for the conference. But yeah, now I'm sharing my experiences on participatory mapping topics that I've been working with since 2005, and so I have structured my presentation in a way that this includes 3 parts. So firstly, I will talk about participatory mapping approaches sort of on a general level, and thereafter of ecosystem services and how we could map the perceived ecosystem services through these participatory mapping approaches. And then in the last part, I take a technological step to 3D virtual landscapes and try to showcase with a pilot study from my ongoing project of how we could do this with these 3D worlds, so to say. And yeah, I'm happy to discuss then afterwards about all the questions and comments you have. But what is participatory mapping? We researchers like definitions, and we could say that participatory mapping refers to the different and multiple ways that we humans interact to create and communicate knowledge and experience and aspirations, our perceptions, our personal subjective opinions, so to say, about the world in maps. And this could mean creation of maps by local communities, often in collaboration with the different actors like governments or non-governmental organizations or universities and so on. These type of actors who are engaged in development and land-related planning. And participatory mapping products can be very crude, for example, drawn on a paper, or quite sophisticated, produced with GIS systems. And often they are produced for different purposes, which could, for example, mean delineating territorial land boundaries or identifying important places that sustain people's livelihoods and quality of life, or then, for example, communicating about how some place could be in future. And we could maybe say that this term participatory mapping is kind of an umbrella, and under this falls many different terms, but maybe most commonly some public participation GIS, or PPGIS, or participatory GIS, PGIS, volunteer geographic information. Then there might be something like feminist GIS or spatially sensitive participation, and there can be quite many labels, but we could say that we could group these under this term of participatory mapping. Then I would like to discuss a bit what led to these participatory mapping practices. So we could look at it from 2 perspectives. One is the participation side, and the other one is the technological side. So in land use planning and environmental management and in development policy, there has largely over the past decades been a turn towards participation, both in theory and practice, and stakeholder participation has gained importance. And for example, to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, participation is emphasized as a way to achieve many of those. But why is participation and citizen involvement important for sustainable decision making? When we look at the literature, we can find 3 different reasons: the normative, the instrumental, and then the substantive reasons. And the normative reasons mean that participation is kind of the right thing to do, that communities, citizens, stakeholders, that they have a right to participate on decision making that concerns them. Then the instrumental reasons refer to creating a better understanding of a specific topic, or creating a consensus and trust and acceptance of a specific decision. And then the substantive reasons, they refer to providing better quality information for planning, that when we have not only the expert knowledge, but we have also other knowledges included, then we are able to make better quality decisions based on better information. And participation is something that is often described using this metaphor of ladders, and this goes back to the work of Sherry Arnstein in 1969, I think, and she theoretized this participation ladder, and it means that on the lowest rung of the ladder, participation is so not that impactful, and when you go higher up, then the participation gets more deeper, so to say. And here, if we look at this figure here, we see on the left corner that on the lowest level, the flow of information is from one direction, in this case, from sort of the decision makers, that the inhabitants are only informed about those decisions. When the participation goes one step sort of deeper, then we are asking opinions from the inhabitants. This is more the type of consultation that is quite often actually the case, for example, in municipality level planning in my home country in Finland. Then when you go further upwards on the ladder, you go to a stage where decisions are made together. And then on the very highest rung of the ladder, the inhabitants actually make the decisions, instead of inhabitants, it could be any other stakeholder, like the local stakeholders, communities in general. And this is actually in land use planning not even what is aimed for quite often, this very empowered status, but maybe something in the middle ladders. There are many different versions of this participation ladder in literature if you have interest to look at it in more detail. And then this other direction of what led to participatory mapping comes, I have background in geoinformatics, so I have always had also interest to look at this direction, and GIS as a system started to emerge in the 1960s in North America, where there was an enthusiasm of these new technological systems where you can overlay spatial data layers and make land-related decisions. And this raised a lot of interest and enthusiasm, but then and also criticism started to raise, and for example, that these approaches are like returning to empiricism and positivism, and they are elitist technologies and enhance existing power structures and so on. And by mid-1990s, particularly among the experts in North America and Europe, and this kind of a GIS and society agenda was put forward. And it pointed out that we should also focus on the social implications of how people and space and environment are represented in GIS. And actually today, quite interestingly, this one geographer, Harvey Miller, has been writing about sort of a similar criticism, that nowadays when we have our smart cities and we are collecting a lot of data, both from satellites, IoT, the sensors and so on in our cities and from the world in general a lot all the time. And this kind of fast geographic information data production, that it's not always the meaning smarter explanation of our societies, but next to this, all this fastly collected data, it has a lot of value, but we would still need kind of slow data, which means data that is carefully and deliberately collected with people to fill in those gaps that our other fast and real time and this sensory infrastructure has, and that these should actually be working in tandem. So both are important. Then to this participatory mapping approaches in general, so interest has been grown during the past 2 decades quite a lot, and since the beginning, participatory mapping has been practiced both by academics but also practitioners. And nowadays there is an increasing number of academic publications. There are conferences dedicated to these topics, workshops, and journal special issues. And there are some special forums on the internet that you could follow if you have interest. So ppgis.net is an old one already, and a bit newer ones are this International Society for Participatory Mapping, which is meant for all scholars, both from the practice and academic side. And then there is a bit more academic oriented network of Participatory Mapping Institute, which was established last year. There's quite a lot of heterogeneity in how spatially explicit data could be collected through participatory mapping approaches, and we could approach it to questions like what is being mapped, at what scale, with whom, and how is this done. And if I start from the what side, what is being mapped, so quite often everyday activities are very easy to tell about by people, like people find that those kind of tasks not very challenging. Land use boundaries is a one also typical application, different types of values and meanings related to land. Then development preferences for future, threats and conditions of the environment, also in relation to crisis events. So quite often in natural catastrophes, some kind of, for example, this open humanitarian street map effort is sort of a voluntary mapping effort related to many crisis situations. Then ecosystem services, a lot that I will talk about soon, different kind of environmental impacts, and also in land use planning processes, participatory mapping can be used in different phases to collect, consult people on their opinions, but also maybe for the evaluation of drafted plans. And how participatory mapping can be done at which scales. So that ranges really from detailed block and neighborhood scale to city, village level, and regional, and even national, why not even global for some context. And with whom has this been done? So with various actors. When you look at literature and case studies, participatory mapping has been done successfully, not only with adults, but also with children and elderly people. Then different types of organizations and communities can be a target group. Different interest groups like hobby groups, some experts like cyclists or something like that in an urban context. Then different experts in their fields, government officials, and so on. And how is it done in practice? So participatory mapping can be done both individually, but also as a group, like you can see it in the photos there. And this, of course, then guides the method to do this. So surveys on paper or online in digital format or something that are targeted for individuals. Interviews are something that often also target individuals, of course, could be done in groups as well. And then the workshop setting is something that targets a group and their opinions. Okay. Now I will move into highlighting how participatory mapping could be done in the context of ecosystem service assessment. And ecosystem services for this audience, I guess, is quite a familiar topic when I think about the context of the GATES project. But what we are talking about is how nature contributes to our well-being, how our quality of life depends on biodiversity and the functions of the nature and ecosystems. And what I have had interest in throughout my career is on this side of this ecosystem service assessment story, that how people perceive different ecosystem services, how do they understand the material or non-material or the regulating contributions that nature has for their well-being and quality of life. And participatory mapping of ecosystem services could be said that this this aims to highlight the ecosystem service benefits to people and then also their spatial heterogeneity. And then we can say that when I mentioned that there are different approaches, individual and the group mapping approaches in participatory mapping, and this of course is the case when we are doing participatory mapping of ecosystem services as well. These different approaches link to a little bit different paradigms, and I try to explain that here shortly. So the instrumental paradigm in participatory mapping stresses individuals and their values, and when we put all the individuals mappings together, we create a collective understanding that comes out from this aggregation. And this is related to the individual mapping type of activities and individuals' knowledge and perceptions. And then the other way to do participatory mapping is through this deliberative paradigm, which relates to group mapping activities. It's more about communication, argumentation, discussion around the maps and the topics that are discussed related to land and ecosystem services in this case, and building an understanding, a shared understanding. So it's a different type of a setting compared to the instrumental mapping. So both of these approaches, instrumental and deliberative, connect to different knowledge systems and ways of identifying and assessing values of ecosystems. And in my work, I have mainly applied this instrumental approach, which communicates the assigned values in the environment, which means the judgment regarding the appreciation of objects such as the places and ecosystems and so on. And here we are then talking about ecosystem service benefits provided by the perceptions that emerge from the interaction with the landscape, and also from the relationships among the people and between the people and the landscape. In those familiar with the ecosystem service literature also linked to the discussion on the relational values. And now I move to some examples from such studies from the context of Africa and Europe. So at the University of Turku, we have an active team doing research in Tanzania for 2 decades already by now, led by Professor Nina Käykkö. And here we have developed this method for mapping, participatory mapping of ecosystem or landscape services, as we have named them in this context. And this has been done in form of surveys that have been almost like interview types of surveys using satellite images that have been printed out, and as you can see in the image, mapping has been done using different colored wooden beads that have been placed on the image, and the local residents have mapped relevant sites of importance for the activities and values in their everyday landscapes, and through this we have been able to identify collective patterns, as you can see here, for the cultivation and firewood collection, for example. And to make it more specifically clear how this links to ecosystem services, so in this case we have created a typology that particularly addresses both the subjective perceptions of the landscape and then the actual uses of it. And this goes over several ecosystem or landscape value categories, so from the material to the non-material cultural ones. And first we have identified the landscape services that are relevant in this specific context, and then their indicators on the landscape, and then the actual interview questions that have been used then in the surveys or interviews. So for example, for material products, we have here a fuel as a service. How it is operationalized as an indicator on the landscape is through firewood collection or collecting wood for charcoal, and then how that is linked to specific firewood, the questions that were posed for the community members. And then for the cultural ones, we have similarly the same type of path. Okay. And what has been interesting in these cases is not only the data that we have been collecting through participatory mapping, but we have also been studying how the land cover and land use have been changing in these specific sites over the decades, using data from 1930s until to today, old maps and aerial images and satellite images. And here we see on left-hand side the land cover class and how dynamically it has been changed over the years. And then here we see then on the right-hand side data produced based on the participatory mapping activities. So the intensity and richness of different types of landscape services. And bringing these data sets together enriches the interpretation of this specific landscape, and it has potential to enhance our argumentation of this complex socio-ecological system. And for example, we can see here that these agroforestry practices that are very prominent in these villages around the villages, they form this kind of a very dynamic landscape change zone that then is also apparent in the participatory data as well. And this is kind of a resource related zone that extends 1 kilometer out from the villages and is very, very, very crucial for the livelihoods of the people. Okay, then I jump to another topic, or the same topic, but another context, and this is from Europe. Research done at the University of Copenhagen in collaboration with many other universities as well, and into two EU projects. And we developed this online mapping survey to assess ecosystem services across 13 study sites in 10 different countries in Europe's multifunctional landscapes. And we were interested to know how people perceive landscapes differently across these sites and how landscape contributes to people's well-being. And then we looked at both the respondents' social demographic characteristics and relationship to landscape, and then also the landscape characteristics as determinants of these ecosystem services. And these were also facilitated semi-structured interviews, we could say, and in the service, we mapped these different ecosystem services, ranging from farm products to outdoor activities, aesthetic values, and habitat and biodiversity related values, and so on. Here we see an example from one of the study sites in Spain, where 181 respondents mapped almost 2,500 different sites where they perceived these ecosystem service benefits. The most important ones out of these were outdoor activities and social interaction and aesthetic values. What was interesting across the European sites was that the provisioning services like farm products and harvested products were more emphasized with those regions that had lower GDP and population density and more agricultural activities, so in the Mediterranean and in the Eastern Europe, and then the cultural services were more stressed in the Northern and Central European study sites. And here as well, we linked this knowledge that we gathered through participatory mapping with these landscape characteristics, and we modeled how land cover and conservation characteristics and accessibility, which was measured in different ways as distance from home and length of roads and slope, and how these are determining what we discovered through participatory mapping. And we found out that accessibility was the most significant predictor of the appreciation of these ecosystem services from the people's perspective, and that the ecosystem service intensity, the sum, and also the diversity are increasing when land cover richness increases. And this means that mosaic landscapes are favored by people. Mosaic landscapes meaning that many different land covers, land uses are sort of mixed. And this highlights then the importance of multifunctionality and spatial patterns for generating these social cultural values, and has, of course, then implications for managing these multifunctional landscapes in Europe. Then as a third case, shortly, a very recent one. This is from the city of Turku, where my university operates, and in this COVID situation, we got interested in creating a survey with a quite quick schedule to try to understand how people's outdoor behavior, recreation behavior changed during this pandemic spring when it started, and how nature contributes to people's well-being in such an exceptional situation. And here as well, we created a survey with Maptionnaire platform where we asked about the outdoor activities, and got the nicely responses from inhabitants in this area. And in relation to each outdoor recreation site that you can see as a mapped point location on this map, in relation to each of these, we asked what ecosystem services they relate to that place. So we were asking activities and values that were linking to this ecosystem service framework. And then we're able to do this kind of a statistical clustering of the hotspots where there are many ecosystem services available in relation to outdoor recreation sites, and then the cold spots where few of those are available. The cold spots are in the city center here, and the hotspots, all the red ones, we can see that they are well-known and highly appreciated nature sites located quite often close to water. So indeed, people are quite skilled in their valuations, so to say. Many of them coincide with the biodiversity assessments done by experts, for example. Okay, then I will jump to this last part of the presentation, and over the years I have created an interest. As I said, I also have background in geoinformatics, that this field is developing fast. It's going to this 3D direction, and the smart city development is a lot around producing 3D data on buildings and infrastructure, and using those to manage our cities and societies. And my question then was formulated as that, do we have some kind of a link to participatory mapping here? Could we have such a link? And I created a project proposal which was funded by the Academy of Finland, and this is around the well-being benefits of urban green infrastructure mapped through participation and 3D virtual landscapes. And this Green Place project aims to increase our knowledge of how we could use 3D landscape platforms, virtual landscapes, to map people's perceptions of green infrastructure, and to explore how the modern 3D mapping technologies could be used in this type of purpose. And then to think how that could all benefit then the planning of our cities. I'm very happy to say that I have very skilled and talented people with whom I work in this project. So Salla, Kamia, Topi, Johanna, and Vesa have all been doing this research with me. A bit of a background related to these 3D visualizations for supporting participation and collaboration in land use planning. So we can see that in the past 2 decades, also these 3D technologies have been developing very fast. And there is kind of this premise that this will change how we are planning our societies. And when we think about land use planning processes, in many countries in the world today globally, this participation and collaboration are kind of requirements in the planning, official planning processes at different levels. We need to get the insights of the inhabitants of different areas and stakeholders affected by land use decision making. And these 3D visualizations kind of have sort of possibility to support visualization in a different way that has been done previously. And there is kind of this premise that this could be quite interesting for the stakeholder participation. But then there are big questions related to the topics that do these kind of visualizations actually work with lay people, how credible they are. We know that it's quite also challenging to produce 3D digital twins, for example, which look like the real world. How salient, how legitimate, realistic, and are they interactive? How immersive, how understandable these kind of technological products are for normal people. And there are studies of how useful the 3D visualization are among planners and professionals. So, for example, architects, of course, they are used to using 3D planning tools in their work. But then there are less knowledge on how these can support participation and collaboration in planning practices. And with my team, we created a systematic literature review around this topic, which is now under assessment. Now I will show one pilot study that we did last spring. So this is very fresh and new from the perspective that we just finalized a report a couple of weeks ago. This is a case study from one city block in the city of Turku. It's called Aninkainen. And yes, unfortunately, I have to say that the slides, the text in the figures is in Finnish, because what we did here was only available the survey in Finnish language. But this was a collaboration with 2 Finnish companies, Maptionaire, who is producing this, or Mapita is the company, and they are producing this Maptionaire mapping platform that many of us here today also have used in research quite a lot. And then another Finnish company called Sova 3D, who is expert in browser-based 3D models that, for example, some municipalities in Finland are using. And in collaboration then also with the city of Turku, with whom we chose the specific site where we tested this approach that was developed here. So it was an integration of these 2 technologies that the 2 companies provided. So the survey platform from the Maptionaire, and then this S3D maps, which when you look at it, you can see that it includes a 3D city model. Then these kind of tree structures are coming from laser scanning data. There are some oblique aerial photos, and the data is transferred through WMS and WFS services, and it is a browser-based solution, so that allowed the integration of this Maptionaire, which also is a browser-based tool. So quite often these 3D visualizations are done with game engines, which are sort of standalone, not browser-based. And we created a survey to plan for the future of this specific city block. There is a white big building here. It's a concert hall that is the concert hall activity is moving to another location. So this site, this building is getting in future some new activities, and overall there is also school, vocational school buildings here which are also moving their activities elsewhere. So there's a lot of change happening in this city block. And from the respondents, so the inhabitants in Turku, we wanted to see how they would like to see the future of this specific area. And in the survey that we created, the respondents could read about information about this history here. So the concert hall and also the school buildings have a history which go back for decades. They could also make a fly through in this 3D view, so that they didn't need to do anything, just push one button and it would fly around the block. Then they could also navigate themselves and click different types of information boxes that you see here an example. When you click the building, this kind of a window opens, which includes an image and then some text related to that building. And also the planned buildings, the new ones, were presented. They could be clicked on and off. And clicking the info button, you could see more information of what kind of planning, what kind of building is planned, so how many floors is maximum, and so on. And then the main sort of the PPGIS part, the participatory mapping part, was then related to future ideas of the city block. I will show it on the next slide. And then lastly, they could also describe their ideas in own words without any sort of technological tools or 3D tools. And the main mapping part is here. So the question was what could be here in the future, and we had given some ready-made options. So new services, culture events, green to the city, new housing solution, accessibility solution, some exercise and sporting possibilities, workspace, and then other ideas. And 135 respondents were able to give some map markings in the survey. About the results, I highlight here only on one slide about this green to the city, which was the most common one. So 1/4 of all map markings were related to the greenness of the city. This block is very ungreen and very busy. There is a noisy road, a lot of traffic. So it's not a surprise as such, but that people would like to have particularly in this middle part of the block, they would like to have green features. So over here we see a cluster of these map points, and overall more vegetation and green on the buildings and so on. But as this is a very specific case, and I don't think it is too interesting to go into detail in the results, but I rather share on the user experiences of this survey. So we can say that those who completed this full survey through all the pages and were able to do the mapping and give even user feedback in the end. So 80% of those who used tablet or a computer that had a small screen, so they did not finish at all. And those who finished, they more often had a proper desktop computer. And this highlights that there are technical challenges, especially with the smartphones. They have very limited functionalities to do and move a 3D map, for example. And then maybe we could also speculate that if people use a smartphone for responding to such a survey, that then maybe they have also possibly less time to focus on that topic. But if you do a survey on a computer, then you maybe are more prone to respond to the end. And these user challenges related to smartphone users are evident when we also look at this user feedback that we collected in the end, and those who were using a smartphone, so almost 6% it could not do the marking part at all, and more than 10% found it was very difficult, while only 10% thought that it was easy to do when we compare to tablet users and those who were using this kind of a real proper computer. So these figures are much higher. And then we also asked about overall the most common challenges in this survey, and the most important was this 3D rendering, that it was too slow, or the whole thing threw the respondent out, and this was actually a serious problem. As you can see, the long green bar over there. Then placing the markers was challenging, and navigation was also for some of the respondents quite difficult. So these are certainly those issues that should be raised up in future development of this type of tools. But there were also some positive views. So those who had this good device and could do the survey in the end, so their experience was very positive, and they would also recommend these type of solutions for participatory planning in future. And what we can learn, I'm almost reaching to the end now. So we see that usability challenges are prominent, particularly with smartphones. And then there is something that really needs thinking from the perspective of urban planning, that we have in our societies a clear digital divide, and also this specific survey, we didn't have responses from unemployed or retired or minority groups. So the usability of this type of complicated or demanding technical tools, of course, is a big question mark among these communities. And in urban planning, we should then rather have a combination of different types of participatory methods. That is something to stress. The city planners felt that this was a very interesting case, and particularly because the 3D city model of Turku that is currently under development, it will be the thing for urban planning processes in future. And so they know that they are in future using it for the planning processes, and they would also like to use that for participation. So they got some good experiences through this pilot. And what they found, the planners, very interesting is that the citizens have a possibility to look at the planning area from different perspectives in a 3D environment. Then conclusions, and this is my last slide now. So in a study of my PhD student Kaisa Jaalama, we recently showed or looked at the concepts of sense of presence and sense of place in communication for urban planning and 3D technologies. And sense of presence is this IT related term, which is relating to the immersion and how the 3D visualization as a medium produces the understanding of that place that it is depicting. And then sense of place is this geography derived term that is linked to the meanings and affordances of a place and how those are delivered through the digital 3D visualization. And this was a case from Finland where we showed that these actually work in tandem, and it means quite a lot for the development of these 3D tools for planning, that they should be immersive, but also somehow deliver the sense of place in order people to really be able to give opinions based on using these type of digital tools. Then the question of green infrastructure and 3D approaches. So this a case that I showed from Turku was not a particularly green planning case. which I would have wished for, but the case was selected together with the city. But there are some challenges related to 3D and vegetation. So those who have been working with these approaches, they know that the technology is much more developed for building an infrastructure mapping in 3D, that there are not that many libraries available for vegetation, and laser scanning data doesn't necessarily very well depict always the vegetation. But I would still would like to see that these kind of approaches have very much potential when we go more into technological development, particularly for this topic of green roofs and walls in 3D environment, something that is like where the height actually plays a significant role. Okay, and that was it from my side. I thank you very much for listening, and if you're interested, you could visit the Participatory Mapping Institute website also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nora, for this very interesting presentation and a great overview of from taking us from participatory approaches ending with the application of these new technologies. It links very nicely to the other sessions we have had. Also,
nice to hear.
Yes, also with some of the insights that you presented from your results from studies that were quite similar to some insights that John Fisher presented in his cases. And it's also very nice how you have touched upon the different expertises from our panelists. So I think we will have a very nice panel discussion later on, and probably you will have to answer many questions from each of them. We have now some time for questions and answers to Nora from everybody that is with us now. So I invite you to write your questions in the chat, or to raise a hand using the reactions, or even unmute yourself and speak if those options are not available for you. While you do that, I wanted to ask Nora. So I think it has been very interesting how you have presented that there are different levels of engagement and participation, and also acknowledging that not all of these levels are necessary in all projects. And I was wondering, these tools are very attractive, and I guess there is a risk that at some point you are very much focused on the technology itself, and you might put the purpose a bit at a secondary stage. Do you see the risk of this happening?
Yeah, well, yes, and indeed, and therefore I think it might be quite important to gather these user experiences of the use of these kind of new technologies. What we did here was only some questions at the end of the survey that we had, but we would have liked to, if we had the possibility, if there was no COVID pandemic, we would have liked to do an observation and a really like systematic observation of the users. And what we learned when we did the literature review that I mentioned, looking at how participation and 3D geovisualizations have been like used for planning in the context of land use planning. So what was evident is that the literature is very heterogeneous. So there are those who are doing the development on the technological side, and then there are those who are interested in the participatory aspect. So there would need to be kind of a bridge between these different communities. That when we were reading the different papers, we could see that the technologically oriented papers were not often, or very shallowly saying that this is supporting participation, but how, that was kind of left as a question mark.
Thank you very much. Are there comments or questions? Yes, Claudia.
Yeah, I also would have a question to Nora. So you have experience in very different contexts. So you worked with technologies in Tanzania, but also in the Finnish context. And I wonder, in very practical terms, so what kind of, how do you make this decision? What kind of technical tools to use to engage people? How do you decide what level of technology, what kind of devices may be fruitful in that context? And maybe you could expand also a little bit on the role of facilitators in that process of engaging people.
Yeah. Data quality, to start with this facilitation question, we have used, quite often done data collection in a way that surveys or interviews or whatever we have is facilitated so that you can actually meet face-to-face often to discuss and then do the mapping, because this increases data quality quite a lot. That's our experience. Self-administered surveys, of course, are such that you can answer whenever you like from your home sofa, but is that enough for good quality data? And it can be, but much better and in-depth data quality is reached through discussion. Regarding of which technology to choose in which context, nowadays in Tanzania also we are using quite advanced technologies because the internet and data networks are developing very fast. So it's getting more possible. So that's one sort of limitation. Also, most of the people living, for example, in the big city of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, they have smartphones and they are smartphone users. So there is not such a gap to Finnish context. But then again, for example, now I'm also involved in a project where we are planning to do participatory mapping with reindeer herders. And there, the limitation is on one hand that we are talking about very large areas, so it can be a bit difficult to grasp the map of a very large area in a survey, and then we are facing the problem that these internet connections are not very good out there. So there are issues that affect this. But there is not like one solution for each context, but you need to be creative, I would say. Yeah.
Anton, you also have a question.
Yes, thanks a lot, and thanks Nora for a very nice overview lecture and the big picture, I think, from all types of participation that you've been involved in, but also a lot of us others listening in here can recognize a lot of this, of course. So Nora, this closure of your talk where we end with the 3D, it made me think a little bit and reflect, because I don't know, I think maybe even 15 years ago, perhaps even, Google Earth launched their big 3D models. And I remember at that time I thought, whoa, now we are moving. Now this 3D tech will take over, and we will really see this coming in also in all our map-based endeavors where we want to engage people with maps in one way or the others. But it hasn't really happened. It seemed that we are all still kind of stuck in these 2D environments for a lot of good reasons, I suppose. But in your view, I mean, is this the main barriers here? Is this relating to the tech side? Is it the planning side, or is it the user side, or is it a mix of all? I mean, but where do you see the main barriers or reasons behind?
Well, very good questions. At least the user side, many of us probably use Google products for routing applications, and during the past decade since Google Map offered this, I'm almost sure that our sort of capacities for navigation and using map product and sort of understanding map reading skills, and those have increased for those who have actively been using these. So that kind of a big step has been taken. These Google services that are the most common are commercial products, and that might hinder their usage from the authorities' side, so on the government sector. So I would say that is something that is hindering it, and from the business side, maybe there are better experts who can reflect on that among the audience here. But definitely this issue that we have, the street views and all this, it has not been taken up as it could have been done. So I agree with you, Anton, that it's not in use in full capacity. Yeah.
Thibault, I see that you are nodding a lot, and that you have also done some research on these challenges. And I don't know if you will expand on this probably during your during the keynote. I don't know if you want to share some views on this.
I can share some views. Thank you for the invitation first. Thank you, Nora, for your talk. That was really inspiring. And so I think like this problem of not having, like still being blocked in 2D is really like a mix of what you say, Anton, like these 3 different parameters where you've got the citizens that is for sure using more and more 3D, but still have some difficulties to use it properly, I would say, especially like having this virtual globe and being like able to navigate into it. It's not really intuitive when you have to use like a mouse and a keyboard, basically, a mouse and a keyboard. Then like the technological side, it's for sure it's something that we still have a lot of data to download before being able to visualize like this 3D visualization, and 2D is like really light, like compared to 3D. So you really need to have like this bandwidth that is quite important. And then within these practices and within this government side, that they're used to use 2D application, and like this novelty of 3D, I think, is like kind of like scary for them to really make a step further and use this technology.
Thank you very much. Havni, I think you had a question before.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a quick question. So you showed a lot of research, lots of data created within your research projects. For example, firewood collection places and so on. I'm just interested whether this data have been used in organizations or government or for decision making. Do you have such a case or example?
Yeah, that's really the relevant question where I, as a researcher, would also like to have a higher impact. And in these European projects, we aim to make an impact to the European level policies. And it was actually quite sort of striking at the end of the project when we needed to digest what is the outcome of a 4 or 3 year project for the European Commission, that you end up having a couple of sentences as something that are the implications for the higher level. So that's sort of a story related to European projects. On the local sites, our local colleagues have done some very interesting analysis on each respect. Well, not on each, but some of the specific sites, and there the impact can be more closer to the local level. Then in the Tanzanian context, we have collaborated with the government offices for a long time. And one of the PhD students in our group was particularly focusing on this topic, that how we could develop these participatory mapping technologies to be included in village level land use decision making. And she studied our participatory mapping products and how those could be developed so that those actually fit, how to make the village level land use planning more spatially sensitive, because there were many shortcomings in those processes, and also it was not as participatory as the guidelines were saying. So to try to solve the problems in the current practice, and out of this we wrote with the National Land Use Planning Commission in Tanzania a guideline of how to link these practices to the land use planning process. Of course, then it's not about ecosystem services as such, because that is not the specifically the focus of a land use planning process, but it's about different land uses by different groups of people in the villages, and how the process is participatory in the way that all different voices are heard as good as possible. And that has been adopted. I don't remember the recent statistics, but several local districts in Tanzania. Maybe to say that we cannot take a full credit as researchers about this, because it's about this capacity building and collaboration that have been there for many, many years, also already before the specific projects where we did participatory mapping. So it's a process. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat. Or sorry, Alan, did you want to say something to continue with this?
Well, actually, we can address the chat one and then I can jump in. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, good. So the question in the chat takes us again a bit to the opportunities and challenges that using 3D technologies offer. So it says, you mentioned the technology gap and usability challenges. Did 3D modeling and 3D participation is some of these technological challenges, or challenges working with maps, or make it more difficult for users?
Yeah, well, this is a good question, and I would say that I could better respond to this if we had the possibility to do a user observation, which we really wanted to do, because the premise here was what the planners of the city of Turku were enthusiastic about, was that people understand better. Because when we have planning processes, we have maps showing the planning areas, which are, for lay people, they are not often very easily understandable, that you need to spend time in order to understand a master planning related map proposal, for example. But instead of putting that into a 3D environment, the expectation from the planner's side is that then people would better understand it. So that would be the easing part, for easing the understanding of people of a future change. But I don't know if this happened. We cannot really measure that through the questions that we posed. We asked shortly in a question that, do you have a better understanding of the area? And some, I don't fully remember the results, but they were positive, that yes, I understood it better. But how in reality, in detail, observation would be more useful for that.
Alan.
Thank you. Nora, thank you very much. Very insightful and kind of really making us think very carefully about the use of these technologies and how to be constantly what's the word? Not recursive, but learning from the process of employing these technologies to improve to enhance their usability and impact. A question that pops up to my mind is, first of all, there are cultural differences in participation. So, and how does that impact the use of these technologies? And that related to that is the concept of learning. I mean, all of us, for me, the first time using Google Maps was a journey of learning, right? How to navigate it, how to make it useful for my ends. And now it's become a standard part of my vocabulary of tools of dealing with life. Is there a role for standardization of these experiences so that it becomes more of an everyday tool, as opposed to every tool is a new discovery of how to navigate it, how to use it? So is there kind of maybe over time we start adopting these as more everyday parts of our experience than a unique thing that we have to first learn the rules and the tools and then get to the result and the impact?
Yeah, well, this how technological innovations spread is a specific field of study also. But when we think about, for example, smartphones, I remember when I got my first one, I was 15 years old. It was 1996, and there was a booklet of instructions that was part of the package. And the technologies nowadays have developed to such a direction that smartphones, well, that was my own first mobile phone. And then finally we are in this world of smartphones, and there are no booklets anymore. These technologies are developed in such an intuitive way that everyone should be able to grasp those. So it's about this, that the innovations are getting so normalized that and there is such a big effort put in the development that it's intuitive. And then also maybe to raise this point from the educational system side is that our schooling system, at least in Finland, is very digitally oriented nowadays. So we are learning already our children to use these technologies and be intuitive problem solvers when it comes to the technological tools. So I would say that this is a change that has taken place and is taking place in our societies. An interesting example when I reflect to my experiences from Tanzania is that not all technological steps have to be taken by all societies. So in Tanzanian context, they jumped right into the smartphones, and they are sort of used instead of computers quite often for many purposes. So that you don't have to follow each step, but way forward is to adopt the newest technology if there is a possibility. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Thibault.
So I've got a question for Nora. I was really impressed by the number of participants that you had, like either in 2D in the Turku area or in 3D. And I wanted to know, like, if you have identified a few functionalities or like things that made people like really more engaged and keen to participate. And I've got like just a follow-up question. Like, did you see differences between the participants either in the behavior or their social characteristic or socio-demo characteristic? Some difference between like the 2D users and the 3D users?
Yes, this respondents in this 3D case were more male than we have had in the previous surveys. And this is interesting because it gives a small indication, of course, only from this one pilot case, that men had interest to respond to this specific survey. This other survey that we, for example, did in Turku related to the COVID situation and outdoor recreation behavior, the topic was completely different though, but we had more women in respondents. This is in literature, women seem to be more actively responding to surveys on green areas. So this topic seems to be attractive for women, and therefore it can also be that this kind of a more technical tool, pilot testing of a new technology, come and tell about your opinion of this area, that it's more tempting for men. So that's a difference that we noticed. And then to get a respondent, there's also research done on this topic, like how they drop out when you proceed further in the survey. So the more dropouts you have, if it's a self-administered survey, a survey that is individually done at your home or wherever, and there the important thing is motivation, and we always put the most important questions in the beginning in order to maximize the effort of the participant, and it's important to have an indication of how the survey is proceeding, at which stage you are, like page 3 out of 5, and these kind of issues. We haven't noticed that there would be a very much benefit of giving a prize to motivate. In Tanzania, we have compensated for people because they have been they couldn't go for their fields to cultivate because they are further away. They have stayed in villages for us to respond to our survey. So then we have, of course, given a small compensation. But in cases of Turku, when we have sometimes had a lottery for a gift card, it hasn't made a big difference for the respondent numbers. I'm happy to hear also if others have experiences who have been working with these methods, like Anton, Claudia, Maria, about these quality or motivation issues.
Well, I mean, if I maybe just can add, I think it's actually a bit promising. I mean, because men is actually a little bit of the silent segment, often in participatory mapping activities, at least in the Nordic countries, it seems. I don't know if it's so all over. So that sense, it's of course promising that we can maybe activate a little bit more with 3D technology. But I will also say, often in traditional survey, at least in Denmark, you often have an overrepresentation of older segments of the population. And that's also when we go into these more kind of online activities, we still have a representative sample of older people, but they're not that dominating anymore. So in some ways, it's actually good to exclude some if it was groups that were overrepresented before somehow. But of course, it's also brings up all these questions around self-selection bias, etc., that we always have to face whenever we work with questionnaire-based approaches, being online, offline, or map-based or not. So.
We also have a comment in the chat from Arman Atoyan. He's also one of the panelists, and he says that they didn't even know the term, but it seems that they have created one of the first participatory mapping process in Armenia for citizen engagement, and he puts a link to this platform that I hope he will introduce to us later. So, thank you. I will now like to thank you very much, Nora, and all of you for the interesting questions. And maybe we can move to the panel discussion. It will be very nice if we could have this part of the session as a joint dialogue or discussion where everybody, keynote panelists, the public, everybody contributes. So feel free to keep this dynamic of raising hands whenever you want to contribute to anything, to any of the comments of the panelists. I would like to start by giving the word to Havni Haratuyan, and she's a lecturer and project manager at the AUA Acopian Center for the Environment. She's also the Geographic Information Systems specialist at the Acopian Center for Environment and the Center for Responsible Mining. She holds a master's degree in geography from the Yerevan State University. And she's right now also managing the EU-funded project Pontos. Agavni, you have experience in using PPGIS in the Armenian context, and also in looking at the potential of using remote sensing and other GIS analysis for analyzing the results. Would you like to share briefly with us your experience?
Sure. Thank you, Maria, for your presentation. Yes, actually, I have a little experience with PPGIS tool for ecosystem services. And if possible, I would like to share my screen because I have prepared a short presentation on this. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So
but we don't see it in present. No, perfect. Yes.
Okay. So this is a project, the first ever project that we have conducted within GATE in collaboration with University of Hohenheim and American University of Armenia. And students from both universities were involved to implement this project. And I would also like to mention before moving forward that this was kind of a huge learning process for us, for the team members involved in this project. You can see their names on the screen. So the main objective of this project was to understand how communities in Gedik Valley, which was our study area, are using land and what kind of benefits they get from natural environment, and as well as to identify the ecosystem services mainly provided by forests. So I've involved the main steps here. I'll just go quickly to the next slide as I don't have a lot of time, and if necessary, I can get back to this later. Just a couple of words about the general topics of the research and main aims. First of all, we wanted to understand and identify the intensively used areas, especially forested areas. Another aim was to identify the locations of landscape changes and combine it with the land use land cover map to understand the general picture, and also to understand the energy use and demand in the Gedik Valley communities. You can see on this map the location of Gedik Valley. It is in the northeastern part from the Lake Sevan. And this is the land use land cover map, which we have again created within the framework of GATE's project. You can see land use land cover classes here with the percentage, and as it's visible from the map and from this summary, it is mainly covered by grassland, and the second land use land cover class dominating in this area is a forest. There are 14 communities in Gedik Valley. The list of the communities with the number of population and the number of interviews conducted in the region is also shown here. So about the methodology, we also use public participation GIS method, internet-based method, and the Maptioner tool, which was already mentioned about this. Why this tool? Because of the advantages. We can collect the data immediately and store on the server, which is making the loss of data and damage of data less possible. Once we conduct interviews with the special questions, the answers can be directly downloaded from the server in the format of shapefile, which is really convenient for conducting a special analysis later once we're back from the field. And it's also very easy to share with the communities the results. One of the main disadvantage is the slow and unstable internet, because this tool is internet-based, and in case of slower, unstable internet, this can be really a huge challenge. We have included 16 special questions. 12 of them were polygonal questions. So in order to answer to our questions, people had to draw polygons to show some specific area, and also 4 point questions. And later, after collecting the data, we've analyzed them using ArcGIS software and its tools. Just a short overview of the results. On the map, you can see the polygons and the points as answers collected from the people living in Gedik Valley. And some of the questions as an example to show how they look like. For example, one of the questions was, which place or landmark do you particularly value because of its historical or cultural importance? And on the map, you can see with the yellow dots the answers, and the density analysis tools, we kind of summarize results to visually identify those areas easily. Then we also had question, what area do you use for animal grazing? This is again, the results were visual analyzed by density tool, and the visualization is shown. Where do you get your food for domestic use from? And again, the map summarizing the results is shown here. Well, we also had questions to understand the landscape changes around the villages of the Gedik Valley during the last 30 years. And we haven't got lots of answers, but some of the answers showing with the polygons are shown on the map. Like people were mentioning landslides. They also noticed some changes in arable lands, which were turned into grassland because of a lack of water. Deforestation was another change, which was mentioned by people, and in general, mainly they've mentioned negative changes in the area. Then we also used the land use land cover map of this area to understand the landscape connectivity with the, combining the land use land cover map with the answers that we have received. And here you can see summary of some of the questions with the landscape. For example, where did you see those landscape changes? 55% of the answers were connected to the grassland areas. 29% was connected to forested areas, and so on. And in the end, we also have some lessons learned, and we kind of summarize the whole project under and our recommendations here. So it is important to mention that if you use or anyone is using internet-based participatory method, it's really important to have paper-based maps and questionnaires with you in case of problems with internet. You have such a backup plan. We faced some problems with the polygons. I'm not sure if anyone using here polygons, but we had kind of challenge with this. And in order to find a solution, we've decided to convert the polygons into points, taking the centroids of those polygons, and then we were able to analyze them properly. I think here we had a challenge connected to the technology, and maybe people were not familiar with the mapping technologies and the area. This is why we had problems with polygons. We also realized that there is no need to use specific terminology. People might confuse them and maybe not understand properly the question. And it is also important to have very famous points on the map, because we used general base map, and people could not recognize the area. So they were looking some famous points which could have been familiar to them. So we thought that it could have been useful to research before going to the field to identify the famous points, maybe some bus stop, maybe some school building, depending on the community, put them on the map to help people to understand the area. So those are the main lessons learned from us. And thank you for your attention. This is the Gedik River in the area, flowing through the area. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Havni. Following up a bit on the discussion we had before, could you maybe share a bit your experience on how people reacted to this participatory mapping process in the Gedik Valley? Because you were using tablets, right?
Yeah.
So how were they interested? Do you think the fact that it was like a mapping tool was something that attracted their interest, or what was your experience?
Yes, actually, it was interesting for them. We were using tablet, which was maybe not so easy for people to handle. So students who were conducting the interviews helped them. So yeah, there was a lot of interest around people. It was the first time that we were conducting such research in the area, and of course, people were interested. Yeah.
It was also interesting when you were presenting the recommendations. I was wondering, because many of us that have conducted research in the field have faced these technological problems, right? So in that case, you can back up with a paper map. I guess if we are using 3D technologies, this is difficult to find a solution for that. Probably these technologies might not be used for such a survey campaign as you conducted. I don't know if there are any views on that among the participants, or.
I'm not sure if there are offline options or tools for 3D mapping or public participation GIS. Would be interesting to learn more about those kinds of options.
Thank you very much.
Quickly, Maria, one of the things that we did, and Aravani, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually took paper copies of maps with us. So if we had technological difficulties, people will actually point it out, and then we will digitalize it. So we went back to traditional methods. So, but of course, one of the challenges which Aravani also discussed is sometimes it was very hard for people to locate, kind of using maps to geolocate themselves, and so that's a challenge in some rural communities where you have to approach the issue in different ways. So
this is interesting. So when I was doing also similar studies on a project where Nora and Claudia were also part of. In the cases where this online tool was not working, we also used MapTuner. I felt that there was a very different type of interaction with the respondents when we were using a map survey. So those surveys were facilitated on site and were approaching respondents individually. And yes, I don't know, somehow I see the many benefits that digital technologies have, that I also wonder if something gets lost in some specific context if you don't have the more analogical or tool. Okay, thank you very much, Havni. Please, if there are any comments or if you have questions, just raise your hand or write it in the chat. Otherwise, I will now invite Anton Stahl Olafsson to share his views. So we will be coming back to the urban context. Anton is Associate Professor in Outdoor Recreation and Green Space Planning, affiliated with the University of Copenhagen in the section of Landscape Architecture and Planning. and he works with people-nature relationships in an urban world. This includes public participation GIS and also social media approaches as ways to support governance, planning, and management of green spaces. So it will be very nice, Anton, if you could share with us more about your research and how PPGIS and social media can help green space planning and management.
Okay, thanks a lot, Maria, for this nice introduction. Well, I did not bring any nice slides. I suppose perhaps should have done that, a bit similar to Nora and Agavni. But just briefly, also coming back to this discussion about, basically participation and what differences will 3D do compared to 2D, and etc. Because I think I can share a few experiences, not so much about the 3D, but at least about something here that I also find is super important. And Nora also touched upon that in her talk around who do we kind of catch and who do we miss out. For instance, some of these more groups, silent groups that will never participate in surveys. So of course, when we do public participation, and I know also that most public authorities and organizations know that, but of course it's also very demanding and perhaps seldom done. But it is just very important that we are using a diversity of different approaches in order to include most possible voices, basically, in our planning and management governance setups, whatever that might be. So diversity in terms of both the level of engagement of people, I would say, both offsite and onsite. And now we just had this discussion around onsite, offsite, a little bit relating to these onsite facilitated interviews, where you actually help out the respondents if there are any questions on the way. Perhaps you even fill out the survey for the respondents. That might differ a little bit. But what I want to reflect on here is some recent experiences in a research project called Smarter, Greener Cities, where we work in a disadvantaged neighborhood in Copenhagen. And we did a traditional, I would say, PPGIS Maptionnaire-based survey with the locals there, but we didn't receive many replies at all, and not representative to any extent. So what we did in that project was actually to hire in some local youngsters, because it's a very young neighborhood, but the young people would never reply to these activities. So we hired in a very nice young guy living out there to do the facilitated interviews on site, and that helped a lot. Suddenly we got all these kind of people and voices into our system that we never reach out. So for me, I think that was very confirming, and also because, you know, we did a lot of effort. We translated the survey into 4 different languages to reach out to this local group and cultural diversity in this area, but it didn't have any effect. What had an effect was this about a true living person out there in the field that they could recognize and feel that they want to share to. So it wouldn't have worked with me standing out there, basically. That would have just been the same result. So for me, that's important. I mean, these also that we try to reflect a little bit more about this recruitment and sampling in our surveys, because it's so critical in terms of basically the recommendations and the planning use in the end in many ways. Maybe that's enough for me now. I can see already now there's a question, so please.
Thank you very much, Anton. So Thibaut, if you want to start.
Yes, I mean, it's not a question, I think it's more like a reflection about what you just said. And I think I completely agree with you. And this idea of being able to reach like the population, and I will say more like the targeted population, the right population, is you have to use the right tool. And it's not because you're creating this PPGIS super pretty map that everyone will just reach it. Is you really have to find a way to use technology or not technology, like as you say, going like in the street and going to speak to the inhabitants face to face to enhance this participation. But as like Nora was presenting, is like but sometimes in another context, you've got 700 respondents in a PPGIS tool. So, and it's kind of like the difficulty, I think, of using PPGIS or technology into urban planning. The point is like each urban project has its own specificities. Like we speak about temporality, scale, objectives, culture, but the targeted population has also its own specificities as socio-demographic factors, preferences or skills. And the tool that you will create it will also have its own specificities. It's like, is it in person? Is it digital? Is it which functionality that you will be provide to the users? And I think like it's really an idea of kind of like cooking all these ingredients all together to be able to adapt our practices to like the right public and the right context.
Thank you very much, Thibaut. I don't know if someone wants to answer and continue with this conversation. Just
maybe just to comment, and Anthony, it's very good that you raised this up. It's an extremely crucial topic, this representativeness and whose voices we actually hear. And it was lovely to hear about this example from your ongoing project that I had not heard before. So yeah, very good idea with this local guy being a facilitator.
In the Armenian context, if I could just jump in on representativeness, if we're going for participatory technologies of the kind that we're talking about right now, PPGIS, we're basically, or any kind of online tools, and we're basically losing a certain few generations, right? The elderly definitely are out. So, those who are, working two jobs, trying to make ends meet, and all the family members are working, they're out, most likely. So we have to be very cognizant of the very limited and skewed information we're receiving.
And it of course also raises the question: is it better with no information than skewed or information for decision-making context? And I would say in many cases that I've been involved in, I think just some information is better than no information at all. But of course, you have to just be critical all the time, as you always will be, and have to be in any type of material or data you make use of, right? But that's also why transparency is super important, and that we also really are transparent in reporting on these issues. I think in all our publications, etc., communication around this.
Nora.
Yeah, this brought me to think about this PhD dissertations that have been written about the PPGIS methods in land use planning by some Finnish colleagues, for example, Maarit Kahila, where she looked at in the planning process, where do these methods fit in and what they can bring to us. Whose voices and so on. And in this type of work, it has been always pointed out as a conclusion that we need different types of participatory approaches, because this PPGIS or any sort of technological approaches to using participation or like promoting participation, that they are limited in capturing specific audiences. And then other methods are maybe then more effective to capture other audiences. So very relevant point for, I think, all of us to keep in mind that we need to have different methods, that going this technology path would lead us to hear only some specific segments of the societies.
Thank you, Nora. That was a very good concluding remark. And now to continue with Tiaina Bogosian, who will provide also more insights into this discussion on how these new technologies can help citizens to engage in participatory processes. She's an interdisciplinary researcher and educator focused on developing data-driven, citizen-centric and interactive information visualization media for urban environmental analysis and participatory initiatives. She's an assistant professor of architectural technology at Florida International University in Miami, where she's continuing her research through a number of National Science Foundation grants. She has previously taught at Columbia University, at Cornell University, at the University of Southern California, and at the AUA, among others. And currently she's a doctoral candidate in the Interdisciplinary Media, Arts and Practice program at the University of Southern California. With her dissertation, she's investigating the role of immersive and locative media in participatory urban environmental literacy and policymaking. So welcome, Diana, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an absolute honor to join this panel. I've been listening in and taking endless notes. So I will share just a couple of slides to expand on perhaps how I can contribute to this conversation. So I wear a couple of different hats. I teach architecture to sometimes students of architecture that are not very technologically advanced. At the same time, for the past almost 10 years, I've been engaged in developing interactive and immersive media, and it's been quite exciting to see how more and more of these not only technologies but also methods being introduced to not only field of architecture, urban design, beyond. So it's been interesting since throughout the years, it's been quite exciting to see how even introduction of GIS to architecture and urban design students has changed over the years. And similar to many other architects and urban designers, when it comes time to look at urban simulations or urban decision making, it's really evident one soon realize that we have still lack of availability of data for simulation purposes. If we are looking at maybe an alternative method to simulation, which is field work, this was a course that I had the honor of teaching at AUA in 2017 with a number of colleagues. And the attempt here was to begin to look at urban environmental mapping. We were interested in looking at air pollution, but we realized that for us to begin to get to that level of analysis, we highly lacked GIS data. So students spend most of their time actually using some custom make and some readily available devices just to engage in mapping. So I think we know that lack of availability of data is why participatory mapping is quite important. At the same time, one thing that's been quite fascinating for me is not only lack of availability of data, but also similar to what was discussed earlier, how using interactive and immersive tools to increase initial engagement. But at the same time, just because we're able to initially engage our audience, it doesn't mean that we're able to sustain their interest. There's endless literature about, and we've done some surveys in Florida International University that people that do tend to show up to initial community meetings are the same people that are going to download these apps, and then they might most probably abandon these after a while. So just like many of you, probably you have many apps on your phone that you're never going to go back to. So just because we're able to put in the effort and create this initial experiences, it doesn't mean that we can sustain the engagement. So part of the ways that I've looked into increasing engagement time and the takeaways has been introduction of storytelling. So my PhD is in School of Cinematic Arts under Division of Media Arts. So I've been highly inspired by cinematic techniques. So for instance, In the upper left corner, this was a short movie that we made in the city of Shanghai to document a journey of two students that never meet, but they're constantly crossing paths and they're doing air quality mapping. Or let's say in this example here, we created a game like interaction similar to Pokemon Go for students on campus to use their card to activate this map of the campus and begin a treasure hunt where they can walk around and find air quality sensors located around campus, and then find data trends. At the same time, looking into ways that urgent information could be also presented using both 2D and 3D views. So for instance, in Miami, as you're probably aware, it's one of the cities dealing with sea level rise in a very drastic way. So we have thousands of fish killed per year. Last year was some of the drastic ones. And at the end, it was quite evident that it was due to temperature increase, but also lack of dissolved oxygen. So this was something that was fascinating, these maps that we created in Mapbox for the scientists. But when we wanted to communicate this with the general public, and although similar to what was mentioned, we use social media, etc., we realized that perhaps we need to create more of a compilation view. So here, you're looking at the boat that was deployed to do additional sensing. At the same time, this is a timeline of the data that was being collected. Then we were querying social media posts that people were sending to Twitter and other social media. But at the same time, what if you take the same graph that's plotted over time and you look at this as actually a roller coaster like wave that you can ride and truly experience the data in a more immersive way. So this was actually deployed in VR, and we're still working on this as part of the project that we want to deploy, because this is an annual thing that we're dealing with. So going back to, I guess, these slides, I guess the takeaway here is not only use combination of a 2D and 3D, but really begin to think about when storytelling in a more top-down way might be more appropriate, when maybe idea of discovery, and it goes back to what Alan was mentioning, the Google Earth discovery. I think when graphics and also the initial experience of the application is presented to the public, maybe in a more playful way, they go to the experience with more of an open mind, versus if we have more of a, let's say, a traditional methods of visualization, I think people want more of a solution, or more of a shortcut to the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana. I'm sure there are many comments and questions, because this was very insightful and a lot of very nice and attractive tools that you have presented here. For the sake of time, I wonder whether we can continue now with Arman's also presentation and then address the comments together, because I think with his projects, we also see the importance of engaging and also incentivizing and maintaining the people contributing. So yes, wait a minute. Yes. So Arman Atoyan is an entrepreneur with a range of successful startups. He holds a master's degree in mathematics from the Yerevan State University. In 2008, he established his first tech company named XTech, which combined innovation and cutting-edge technology solutions, and had many successful spin-offs, such as CityBugs, which he posted before in the chat, and Arlopa, which is a leader in augmented reality and virtual reality in the region. Also with his projects, he has been given various awards and recognition, and he's member of the Internet Society of Armenia. So Arman, it will be very nice if you could share your experience with these tools in the context of public participation, and also how they contribute to new ways of communication between citizens and policymakers.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. It's really insightful and very interesting to discuss those topics. Like as I mentioned in the chat, maybe we created like very first like participatory project without knowing even the term. So it was back in 2012 when we created this citizen engagement platform, where citizens are basically reporting the issues. Like in the tech, we have a term which is called bug, which means the issue in the system. And we've been thinking that the city is also sort of like a living mechanism, like a living organism, and it also can have some issues, and the citizens can find and report them to the government. And we started the project back in 2012, then we won multiple awards internationally. But the project is not quite active right now, maybe due to lack of the energy or maybe will of the government to have this like exploded, because in our mind the system should be sort of like a public, and the map is always showing all the issues that exist in the city unless they are solved. So and they've been like sort of complaining that like all the map, all the cities became in red after time, and that's how it works. Like when citizens are reporting the issues, it's coming as a red colored pin on the map. Then when it gets solved, it becomes like green. And several times there was discussions about the data, like why this data shouldn't be under like governmental monitoring, etc. And we've been keep telling that this is our private initiative and we don't want to sell it to the government, or we don't want to give it to the third party. And currently the project is not super actively supported, even though we've been considering this project as our corporate social responsibility. We never asked to pay. We've been saying this is the CSR of the X-Tech. We contributed the software to our citizens. But the project is really interesting, and we are a lot of time thinking to relaunch it somewhere in Europe where it's more valued in terms of the like government more considers this public participation, and they are more open, and they really don't afraid to have a lot of issues listed publicly. But in this context, in context of the 3D, I also want to comment on the 3D tools, especially on the augmented reality and virtual reality benefits that could be applied to the urban planning and citizen engagement, because that's absolutely new way of having people like experiencing something that doesn't exist yet. Let's say some new new park should be constructed, or some new building should be made. And there is an option to see that building through augmented reality in that place within the real scale. So the people can have a sense what kind of building it's going to be, how big is it going to affect anything or not. And we had the experience by reconstructing the ancient buildings, like the buildings that we had in the past, that they doesn't exist right now. So the same way it could be construct and placed the like upcoming buildings, the buildings that should, or parks or whatever it should become in future. And through virtual reality and augmented reality, these simulations can be previewed. But I agree, like not everyone has these technologies, or not every citizen can really like use those tools, and they are still like adopting. Maybe some very techy people will be able to see this, but I believe that sci-fi experience can lead like really big interest among the citizens. If they will know that this kind of experience is possible, maybe they will get more interest to like see it, or to like vote for it, or to participate in the public discussions. In our term, we are mostly focused on commercial projects, but those kind of projects, or the projects that the Biaina was showing, it's close to our hearts. And we also had one project implemented with Biaina, so we helped on a AR part, which was also a very cool project in terms of showing the air pollution in the city through like a virtual layer of the over the map. So you can have a sense which part of the city air pollution is bad indexed. So which part is it red, which part is green. So that's really engaging experiences. And I believe if we will adopt that kind of technologies, more citizens will be interested to learn and to try that out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arman. I don't know if there are pressing comments. I think Alan, before I move to Thibaut. Alan,
no, please do. No, go ahead.
Because I think Thibaut will also address some of the aspects that you both have mentioned on the importance of this method, or how can these technologies bring transformations in the current planning processes. So I think it will be very interesting if you could now, Thibaut, tell us more about your research. So Thibaut is currently working as a research assistant at the University of Applied Sciences and Art of Western Switzerland in GIS-related topics. And he's conducting a PhD on 3D participatory e-planning technologies at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. He holds a master's degree in GIS software engineering from the Sorbonne University. And he has also some hands-on experience. So he's been working as a GIS software engineer consultant for large companies in transport, mail distribution, and water management. So, Thibaut?
Yes. Okay. So I will try to be quick also, but try to like speak about like what I heard before and this interesting insights. So yes, as you say, I'm conducting like right now a PhD so on digital 3D technologies, and the point is to try and to enhance public participation in urban planning with those technologies. And on this, I'm trying to focus my regard on two aspects. The first one is to try to understand how to mobilize these 3D tools within the participatory approaches. So as we said before, like one of the problem of urban project, they've got like their own context, and it's difficult or even impossible to have a solution that fits basically all situations. And it's important to always adapt our tools and solution that we want to bring to the participants, and or even to mix different tools. Like one tool doesn't really address to all the publics, so maybe you have to do some in-person participation with some part of the public and some socio-demographic characteristic, and more technical and technological part for another section of the population. So that's the first aspect that I'm trying to address during my PhD. And the second aspect is to understand how to use this 3D technology more into this technological aspect and parts. So how should we represent the data? Should we be like more photorealistic or abstract? Or which kind of functionality to provide to the users? And within the conduction of my PhD, I tried different solutions that I can speak like rapidly about. One of the first proof of concept that I arrived with was kind of 3D PPGIS. So where it's kind of like a map pioneer in 3D, where we were asking participants to locate positions within the city about their preferences, so where they like to spend time, what are the elements they don't like, or how long are they staying like on each of the location. With the categorization of the city elements, are they speaking about buildings or parks or a point of view or even a bar or something like that? A second tool that I developed was more like a bit after in this planning processes, where architects already arrived with different solutions. And the point of this proof of concept was to be able to visualize this 2 or 3 architectural solution, like within the 3D model, and to be able to vote in order to decide of which project they like the most, to after like maybe take a decision about this. And now I'm currently like working, because we spoke about like the different aspect of learning how to use the tools basically. And it's the thing that I just said before, that navigation is still like, it's like people are progressing onto these technologies and being like more proficient for sure, but there is still like a lot of difficulties to address. So I try to kind of put the participatory process outside of the lab or outside of current planning processes. And basically participants could like go in the city and use the smartphone as a portal. So basically they could see like the virtual environment directly in the portal and their mobile phone, and move into the city. So I was controlling basically what they were seeing with the accelerometer of the mobile phone and their current GPS position, so they could see in front of them like the real, and see the virtual in front of them also with this this application. And from there, I was integrating some data about new projects that the city wanted to make, so new buildings basically that are still under discussions, and participants could just like or dislike directly their proposition, and directly on the spot. So you don't have really to navigate, you just have to get into the platform and then just looking around you. And there is like, the point was really to reduce their inputs in order to facilitate their participation.
Thank you very much, Thibaut. I think it has been very relevant across the different presentations, this aspect of collaboration with the public administration in order to make use of these tools and to put them at the use of planning. I think, Armand, you have tackled a bit on that, on a bit of lack of interest from their side, or not knowing very well how to deal with that. And I was wondering if you have some ideas on what are the opportunities that there might appear in Armenia if these technologies become more accepted, or how this can happen.
You mean 3D technologies? Or
yes.
I believe that could make some interesting impact. That just what Thibaut was saying, that's really like engaging and interesting experiences for the citizens to really feel that they are part of it, they are participating. I think the biggest problem is that whatever is not implemented by the government, they are sort of like afraiding it. It's not their own initiative. And the same was with the city bugs. So at the beginning, they might thinking maybe under it we have some political agenda. That's why we want to sort of show that the like municipality is not working well. Then later they discovered that we don't have any political agenda. We are just like tech company that is interested to make our city a better place. But the same within 3D technologies. Like right now, I can say from our side, we have all the tools and knowledge to implement such projects, but I don't really believe that the government will be interested to sponsor this kind of projects, to spend like budgets on this. If this will be presented, the most probably they will say like that's very niche project, like it will not have like a big engagement. The same way we have presented few years ago the virtual guide project for the city. So imagine you have the augmented reality avatar guide in many places in the city that can talk within 10 languages. And the same response for the municipality was, this is too like a techie thing, like our citizens or even the tourists will not use this kind of tech. I think some time should pass so they will also be ready for such projects.
Thank you very much.
Can I
Yes,
jump
Alan.
in here, because I'm, I know we're talking about public participation, and we're talking about, and public participation often happens in the context of policymaking, communal decision making. So that's why the topic of government comes in. But these technologies can also evolve and develop and be perfected in the market conditions, right? A real estate developer wants to sell a community to buyers, right? You get impact, you get kind of this virtual experience of going through the community and deciding how the space works and all that. And once these technologies are a little bit more perfected and adopted by the market, the public sector is a good follower. They're not usually good leaders. So once these technologies are worked out, then maybe there could be uses in public sector settings. Because right now, to formulate a problem for the public sector and put political capital at stake that we're going to engage the public using this technology, which I'm not sure people will understand, buy, or be effectively employed. It is a risk for most public sectors around the world. So,
yeah, if I can add something to this comment, and we discussed about this slightly in our pre-panel meeting, for public to participate in these type of media-based technology, again, going back to my comment about, sure, there might be an initial interest, but then how do you sustain that? Usually there's 4 parameters that we've learned from more not only game theory, but also participatory. So these are either people participate either for research, they participate for activism. So say people that are going to show up to the city center are going to be the same ones that are going to show up to more of maybe this type of technology base. It could be because of monetization. We see quite a lot of examples of that. And then the last one could be entertainment. So it's very difficult to have all of these, but if with the right balance of all, and that's why Pokemon Go by Niantic is a great example of when they weren't successful with the Google Street View, or they couldn't be as explicit, they then channel the development into Pokemon Go. One quick thing regarding Alan's reflection, I completely agree with you. I think it's quite naive to say that this is it's only through gathering the public that we're going to be able to normalize or understand actually how to use this technology better. I think another use case could be just the way that currently scientists use more 3D and immersive technology. In our cases, for some of the sensors to be checked, it takes quite a long time, and in our cases in our campus, they were able to use the same tool just to see if the sensors were running or not. And at the same time, scientists could use the same tool in a more exploratory way as well. There's a great statistician, John Tukey, who came up with this method of exploratory system, which allows scientists to not make a hypothesis and look at information later. So all of these tools have the possibility to basically be more normalized, and maybe it does go back to how we develop our sense of user experience.
Thank you very much. So we have run out of time. Sorry for having to push this last part. I think Nora and Anton had to go, but I don't know, Nora, if you would like to add a closing remark, or I saw that you wrote actually this closing remark in the chat.
Yeah, I wrote something in there. So maybe not to repeat, but I just quickly want to say that it has been very interesting to listen to these discussions today. This field of 3D and technological side related to that and all tech development is completely new to me. So I'm learning all the time, and I've learned a lot today. So many thanks to everyone here. And yeah, I apologize. I need to go to a train. Yeah. And thanks for the invitation once more, Claudia and Maria.
Thank you, Nora.
And the Gates team. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm sorry for, well, these are the 5 minutes we started later. But so I don't know, maybe it would be nice if the other speakers will have also some closing remarks that you want to share. And also, I think it would be very nice if we could keep in touch to continue this discussion. So I think now at least the panelists have each other's contact. And I'm sure that if anybody from the public will be interested in getting in touch, we can probably facilitate the emails. So yes, do you want to say any final words?
Yes, why not? Thanks for this interesting session and discussion, like first. And so as we saw, like during the discussion, I think that PPGIS and 3D technology has really like a huge potential, I think, to address like either policies, but also like public sector needs. And I think it's really important, but it's still quite new. And I think that we really need like to do more projects to be able to understand better how those technology and tools works to be able to make them like more efficient. But also that is not the solution to everything, and that we really should pay attention of this to not exclude other parts of the population when you use this kind of technologies, and voila.
Thanks a lot. Jaina, you presented very different tools and very creative approaches. I don't know if through your experience you have realized that there are some aspects that work very well and others that don't work, and you could maybe share these insights with us.
Sure. First of all, I want to, if I can, just emphasize, and this is not anything, but whatever we call it, transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary. I learned a lot by collaborating with Armin's practice, and we had really interesting conversation days where I showed up with a 2-meter by 2-meter map to put it on the floor to then actually experience this augmented reality project. And so as much as possible, we want to encourage that. In terms of learning, I think it's what I'm realizing is duration of engagement and people's patience with this media. So we really want to be clear. I think everybody at this point responds to maps. They know that they can, when they're looking at dislocated media, they can find themselves. We need to be mindful of privacy issues. People are skeptical. People don't want to download another app on their phone. So I think not everything needs to be an app. That's why I think a combination of perhaps short videos, websites, even takeaway pamphlets. So we have projects where we created a little postcard that they could take away, that they could just scan and just go to a website. So, but let's say more complicated technology doesn't always, as you know, means better results. But I think just having a multi-pronged approach and try to do many testing before launching a project.
Thanks a lot. Arman, I don't know if you want to add something to this.
Nothing specifically, just to thank everyone for this nice panel. It was really like interesting to learn about different ideas and different projects that is happening. So would love to keep in touch in future if someone is interested in AR and VR technologies, so for some consultation or something, just feel free to reach me out.
Thank you. And Ahavni, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. As this is kind of a closing event of the GATES project, I would like to thank you, the whole GATES team, for this great journey. For 4 years, we worked together to implement really great projects, and it was really a huge learning process for every single person, faculty, staff, student involved in this project. So I hope the project will have continuation, and as it was mentioned before, there are new technologies now, and the technology is developing very fast, and we'll have possibility to explore those new methods, technologies together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Claudia or Alan, do you want to say something?
Just quickly, a lot has been said, but very briefly, immersive technologies, I think, are here to stay. We're going to become more and more engaged with them. And if I have my way, in the next year, we'll have more discussions, academic discussions at this point, around immersive technologies and learning, transformative learning especially. And this is not that far from immersive technologies and public and policy making, and so they're all kind of in that goulash that we have to kind of take apart and understand and make more tasty goulash out of. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So with this, I think we can now close this session, and tomorrow there is a session that for students, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good. So thank you very much to everybody for participating, for the interesting discussion. Sorry for the rush at the end, but as I said, I hope this is to open future discussion, and yeah, maybe look forward to meet you in the future.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot to all of you.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.